Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Ride. This is Jillian here, and I just wanted to check in with y'all before we start this interview because we did actually record this with Kole right after he won the Run for a Million, which was back in August. But we weren't able to release anything about who the winner was until recently because of the TV show The Last Cowboy. So when we talk about some things that have already happened, like the futurity and the Congress, it's because we did record this a few months ago back in August. So we just wanted to let you know what was going on with that, and we hope you enjoy this episode. This episode of The Ride is brought to you by Bimeda. Bimeda might be the biggest animal health company that you've never heard of until now. Bimeda's products have been trusted by veterinarians and owners since the 1960s when their Irish roots began. Bimeda is one of the largest producers of dewormers like Equimax, Bimectin, and Exodus. World-renowned equine athletes also rely on polyglycan, a patented formula that replaces lost or damaged synovial fluid, and Confidence EQ pheromone gel, which reduces and prevents equine stress. Consult your vet and visit buymedaus.com to see where to buy.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Ride. This is Nichole, and I'm here with my co-host Jillian. And today we are interviewing Kole Price of Price Performance Horses. And he just coincidentally, we had this interview on the schedule before the Run for a Million, and Kole Price just happened to be the big winner. So congratulations on your win. And thank you so much for taking time to come talk with us, because I'm sure you have been crazy busy.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on here.
So you are in the reining industry, obviously, since you won the Run for a Million, which is one of the biggest reining events in history. How did you get your start in horses? Let's go back to the total beginning of where your love for horses actually started.
So I'm from a town in Wynant, Illinois. My family had Percheron draft horses when I was born. We had a 4-horse hitch that we would go around all the county fairs and then the state fairs and show. And I think we did that until I was probably 8 or 9, maybe 9 or 10, somewhere in there. But I was always horse crazy. That's all I ever wanted to do was be around horses. I definitely think I was just born with the itch of it. I mean, seriously, that's all I ever wanted to do was be around horses. Honestly, and I didn't really care what type. I don't know that I really had. I mean, I think I always had interest in riding, but I didn't know that it was going to be, I didn't know it turned into what it did, for example. But we got out of the draft horses, and then I started going over to my neighbors and riding. She had just a couple quarter horse trail horses that she rode a little bit, and then kind of started like just exploring my options as far as learning. Through magazines like Horse and Rider, and there was a lot of stuff on RFD TV. So I got really kind of interested in like Clinton Anderson and John Lyons and the natural horsemanship kind of, that sort of program. And I kind of really fell in love with the idea of training horses. I remember the first time I ever got a horse to turn into me in the round pen and walk up to me with nothing on it. And I just thought that was just mind-boggling what you could, when you got into a horse's brain, what you could actually get it to do willingly. And I still have that. I mean, that's kind of still, that itch has never gone away. I mean, just the to learn how to make a horse hunt what you want. And every day I try to focus on that and try to learn more from it. Everybody wants to become a better horse trainer, and I always try to become a better horseman. And I think that's what separates the good from the greats. But I was probably, no, I don't know, probably 13 or 14. And I kind of started training. I'd get, like in the summer, I'd get some outside horses in to start. Kind of started up my own little business for a while. And I think at one point I had like 10 horses. I was going around the neighbors and riding them. My grandpa would haul me around and I'd ride them for an hour and just made a big circle. And then my grandpa bought a horse from the Pitzer Ranch that had Hollywood done it. I think it was a granddaughter Hollywood done it. And that, once I kind of started like trying to figure out the bloodlines, I knew Hollywood done it was a reining horse, but I never really paid any attention to what reining was. And since he bought a reining bred horse, I'm like, well, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do with it. Um, so then I started kind of looking more into reining. And I do remember one of the very first runs I ever seen was Sean Florida's Futurity win on Wimpy's Little Step, which is probably a terrible first run to ever see because that's what you think it's supposed to look like. um, so then I started kind of wanting to flirt around with trying to learn how to do it. And I did it for probably a year or two by myself. And I figured if I'm going to do this, I need to go get help. And kind of at that point, I kind of had the itch, like the feeling of turning a horse around the very first time was just like mind boggling to me. So I think from there on, I think that horse made me want to become a reining horse trainer. And even like throughout high school, you know, when your guidance counselors ask you what you want to do, um, she actually told me after I graduated high school, she said, "You're the few students I didn't have to worry about because you told me exactly what you want to do and that's what you're doing." But I think I was between my junior and senior year of high school, I got an internship with Brent Lowski in Texas. And my parents drove me down there, kind of want to make sure the situation was good. Um, and that was at Green Valley Ranch. And at the time, that was probably one of the biggest reining ranches, as far as they got studs. And Tom McCutcheon was there. And so it was an incredible place to get, you know, your feet wet. And then right out of high school, like the day I graduated high school, I moved down there and worked all the way through the fraternity with Brent Lowski. Um, you know, and I'm very appreciative for Brent taking me in because looking back at it, I mean, I knew nothing. And one thing, like I've always been good. I always ask a lot of questions. I always just sit back and watch. You know, I don't want to say I'm self-taught, but I've tried to make myself pay attention and try to figure a lot of stuff out by myself. So from Brent's, so I was there from May, I think, whenever I get out of high school to all the way through the fraternity. And then I moved back to Illinois and went to Blackhawk College. I kind of, you know, in my mind, you always know, well, what's going to happen if you get hurt or blah, blah, blah. You're going to have something to fall back on. But honestly, I think I more or less just did it to ease my parents, you know, a little bit. But I went to Blackhawk College and it was an equestrian school. So when I was there, I actually student taught one of the riding classes. And I rode a couple horses for my teachers. But I remember I had to do an internship, and I got hooked up with Mike Davis, who was in Davenport, Iowa. He was an hour away. Um, but when I was at school, I was on the horse show team, and so like that, say Monday night I had practice, and that would be we usually get done at like 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Well, I'd usually just stay on my buddy's couch that night, and then the next morning I'd have to get up at 6 o'clock. I'd student teach the riding class. I'd go to class all day. I think I usually got out on Tuesdays at like 4 o'clock. I'd drive an hour to Mike's. I'd work until 10 or 11 o'clock. I'd sleep on his couch until like 3 o'clock next morning. I'd get up. I'd clean stalls. I'd feed. I'd ride usually as many as I could. I think I'd usually get 6 or 7 in. I had to leave Mike's at like 9 or 10. It was an hour drive back to school just to start the whole thing. And then that day I'd stay there, go through class, go to the horse show team practice, and it was just like a vicious, like, I mean, I was broke. I probably only slept 3 or 4 hours a night, and I did that for a good year, at least a year. And the one thing I could think, just in my mind when I was doing that, and it was really tough. Um, and when I say I was broke, like it was a blessing that Taco Bell had the 69-cent burrito because that's what kept me going. But I remember just thinking, I'm like, I bet I'm the only kid my age doing this right now. Like, you know, and that was kind of the driving factor. And that's one thing I've always been self-driven. I've never had to have anybody say, go harder, go harder. So it was always my mentality. But every morning driving to school, I was like, I'm doing something that I know nobody else my age is doing. And that was kind of like a little chip on your shoulder that made you keep pushing through. Um, so right out of college, I just kind of stayed with Mike, and I was with Mike for 5 years, Mike Davis. And that was probably where I matured into, as far as learning the most stuff, being able to get in the show situation. I showed my very first horse in 2009. Matter of fact, we were just talking about that this morning, and like, um, I showed my very first horse in 2009. So 12 years ago, I showed my very first reining horse. But it was just kind of a cool time because, I was growing into it and I was hungry and I was just getting a little piece of the pie every once in a while. It was just enough to keep making me hungry and make me go more. And I really think that's probably where I evolved the most. Um, but after 5 years, I decided to go work for Gabe Hutchins, and at that time, he's the Darling Triple Eight Ranch in Princeton, Kentucky. I felt like I just needed to go, get another notch under your belt. Learn as much as you can from somewhere else. But I kind of needed to go somewhere where there was just a little bit more horsepower, and Mike agreed with it. It was a very hard conversation because he was like a stepdad to me. But he's like, you need to go because you're kind of beyond this. And I was there for 2.5 years, dang near 3 years. When I was there, there was a horse that I actually picked out as a yearling. His name was FM Shining Tag Checks. And in 2014, I won the level 3 at the Congress on him, and I made my first level 4 finals. I think I was 7th on him in the Congress. And then took him to the futurity. I missed the level 4 open finals by half a point. I won the level 1 futurity, and I was reserving level 2 and 3. I think that year I ended up winning about 90,000, and it was kind of like my breakout year. And that was kind of the first horse that ever said, all right, this is what it's supposed to feel like. All that stuff you learned, this is why you learned it, and I'm going to show you what it was like. So definitely don't think I would have gotten here as fast as I did without that horse. Or also Brent Lowski, Mike Davis, and Gabe Hutchins. I'm one person that I'm very proud of who I worked for. I'm still very close. Actually, everyone that I worked for was out there when I went over the $1 million mark, which is very special to me. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. In 2015, I started up my own business.
That's quite the story. I loved so much about it. Actually, I'm from Illinois as well. I'm from Naperville, and my mom grew up over in Amboy, so I know the area.
I used to go to Amboy. The what was it? The Green was it the Green River Trail Club or whatever? Oh yeah,
you do.
I used to go there. Yep, for sure.
We probably crossed paths at some point
sure.
and never even knew it.
I'm sure. So I'll tell you a funny story, and this kind of has molded me into, I'm very, very particular about how my horses look. And I get that from my grandpa, my grandpa Melvin is the absolute reason I'm into horses. He truly is. He's been the biggest influence on me. But my grandpa is one of those people that won't say a lot, and he'll say exactly what he wants. And, it's, where you stand. And I remember one time I had this, so like the very first horse I ever truly trained, my first horse was a 2-year-old App stud, which why they bought me a stud, I don't know. But he was
not just a 2-year-old, a stud.
Yeah. So, and he was beautiful, big blanket Appaloosa. And I remember I went to Amboy, the trail club, to trail ride, and I took him, and my grandpa showed up just to hang out. I think Amboy's only like half hour from Wynette, where I'm from. Matter of fact, my high school, we played Amboy in our conference. But that's a funny story. So my grandpa shows up, and my blanket Appaloosa's got a big old manure stain on his white. And my grandpa told me, he said, if you ever take a horse off our property with manure stain on it, I'm going to sell every horse you have. And I still like my horses today, if they go to the vet, they better be clipped, they better be clean, because you're putting out an image, and that's what he was teaching me. You're putting out an image, and he taught me that when I was probably 10 years old. He used some words that I don't really want to say on here that I was like, but he was serious, and honestly, it's kind of been like a motto of mine that anytime you're in public, they better look like however you want to be represented. So that was a funny story about the Amboy trail club. Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, I grew up going to that
Yeah.
saddle club. My aunt got married there. My grandparents'
Yep.
funerals were there. It was like
I remember
the
the
go-to
little
place.
the barrel race and the little tiny arena on the big hill. That's funny.
Oh man, yeah, we probably crossed paths when we were
Probably.
a very long time ago.
Yeah.
But wow, no, I like Blackhawk is an insanely good school, especially if you want to get a degree in the equestrian world. And
Yep.
I have a lot of people who went there. But like you said, I mean, it takes a really the horse industry is not for the weak of heart. It takes a lot of driving and working, and like you said, you were putting in so many hours on top of your school schedule and your showing schedule, and it's just I think it's definitely proved to be worth it, because you just took home the run for $1 million. You just took home what, $500,000 the other day in one run.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think you definitely have to be like a little stubborn minded to be able to push through the hard. It's not an easy job, especially being an assistant. You're there to work, and you're getting paid really for your college. I mean, people don't think of it that way. So you're there to work and learn. So that's kind of how it was. It's not a great paying job, but it's tough. But I don't think you can be successful without having to go through the struggles of that.
Anyway, going from you talked about that you started your business in 2015, right?
Yep.
So what was the kind of deciding factor on like, this is like, you finally just felt the confidence to be able to go out on your own? Because I would imagine that's a pretty hard transition to make when you've been working for all these great trainers. And like you said with Gabe, like the reason you went to Gabe was because the horsepower was there, and it's a pretty common thing that when someone goes out on their own, they don't necessarily get that kind of horsepower that an established horse trainer has. So that's a pretty big step to take. What kind of was your deciding factor on that?
I think I finally had a good credential, coming off that win, the futurity win. And, at that point I was starting to get so I was, at the time I was in Overbrook, Oklahoma is where I ended up before I went on my own. And I had a lot of people from Illinois that had followed me around through different trainers. And I had a lot of people that were really wanting to buy me horses. And I just felt like now was the opportunity. So I actually went back to where Ottawa, Illinois is, Leland, Illinois. It's not too far from Naperville, actually. I went there and started up my own business just because, I thought that was an area that kind of wasn't being, touched that much. And I thought there was a lot of good clients that, and also, I mean, it's not an easy thing. And I knew that there's going to be times where I was going to need help, and I was an hour away from my family. I have a really, really close family. So I always knew that, sometimes you're going to need to have a little help. And I thought that was important to me. But I think it was just a timing, it was kind of come off that win. And I don't know you're ever really ready, but I think it's kind of one thing that you just got to hang it out there and try it. But really, I was an assistant trainer for 10 years too. So I felt like I put in my dues. It was just time. You could just tell it was time.
So would you say that there was a moment, you talked about how you watched Wimpy's little step in the futurity, and that was your first encounter with the reining. Would you say that there was a moment since then that made you realize, like, this is what I want to be doing, this is where I'm supposed to be? Or I mean, other than last night, probably was a pretty good confirmation.
So, but I'll tell you what really fascinates me. So I was saying I kind of learned, I actually probably got introduced to reining through Clinton Anderson. And I'm very, very fortunate. I thank him a lot. I actually become close friends with him. But learning how to dissect a horse's body and teach it how to move this part where that was just fascinating to me that I could do that, be able to side pass a horse, push their hip up. And I think once I learned the body control aspect of it, and I remember the first time my horse accidentally accidentally spun, I was like, that is the coolest freaking feeling in the world. And it was the same thing. I didn't get to stop a horse till later, but I was like, that is incredible. Like that was probably the ultimate high that I'd ever had. Just that feeling of complete power steering. But again, it all goes back to you're teaching this horse to do something with its mind. You're teaching it to crave that maneuver. I think the horseman in me, like once I learned how to take the ability to teach this horse to move its body wherever I wanted it, and then not only that, but teach it how to use its mind to do what I wanted. That part right there, and it still is fascinating to me, but that is probably what pushed me more towards the reining. And I do think a reining horse is the ultimate broke horse because, like when I was at Mike Davis's, I had to give a lot of lessons just to people wanting to learn how to ride. An old retired reiner is the absolute easiest horse to give a lesson to because they steer. If they get tight, they stop. And that's one thing I thought I've always, I don't know, I guess the more I got into it, the more I was addicted to it. But I would say when I first learned how to spin one and move its body around, the control aspect of it, that's when I knew that I wanted to be a horse trainer.
I get that. After about 15 years of doing the all around, I rode a cow horse and stopped and turned and worked a cow. And I was like, yeah, this is where
addicting.
I want to be.
It's just addicting. I mean, it's really,
totally.
It's kind of, I don't want to say intimidating because that's not the word, but you're just like, wow, this horse is doing this all by itself. And, it's like being in so much control that you're almost not in control in your mind. You're not having to do it for them. That's the coolest feeling in the world.
Yeah. I had ridden some like pretty nice all around horses and it just couldn't compare to the first time I rode a cow horse and now I have a reiner, a yearling coming too that I haven't obviously ridden yet, but it just that feeling of like the power you have underneath of you when you go like running into a stop and you just, you just move your body the littlest amount and they're right there with you. And it's just, oh man.
And what's really cool is, and especially the quality of horses I'm getting now, but these horses want to do it so bad. So like, one of my good 4-year-olds, his name's Trendsetter, who I've been showing all year. And I've never been around an animal that loves to ride. Like, so after the Derby, the NRHA Derby, I just kind of turned him out every day. I was like, you need a good break. Like, I mean, he's robotic. And I was like, I just want to give you a mental break, turn you out. And that horse, after about 2 days, would just look at me. I turned him out in the round pen and just look at me like, are you going to ride me or not? Like, and that horse, like, he seriously is the happiest being ridden. And it's not even like having to do the maneuvers, but he loves it when, if I got some friends or something, I'm like, go get on Trendsetter and lope him around. He absolutely freaking loves it. And that is really cool to see that these horses, they want to do their jobs and they love it. I think that is really cool now.
I feel like that probably makes your job so much more rewarding when, you both love it and you can tell that they love it. And is that, when you're looking for a horse to start in the reining, is that something that you look for, or what all do you look for to find a good one?
That would probably be, of the factors, that is the absolute most important factor, because if they don't want to do it, you got to remember they're a 1,100-pound animal. There's no way you can make them do it. And even if you make them do it once, they're going to get you somewhere. They're going to kick out or say no. So a lot of times those horses don't work that long. I don't think they have longevity. And I understand some horses are tough and it takes a while to get them. And once they get them, they usually get it. But, those ones that just want to be your buddy. And usually it's not even so much just doing reining maneuvers. They're the same ones that they pick up teaching how to lunge right away, whatever you want. They're just nice horses. That's kind of every horse that I've had that's been good. They want to be your best friend, whether it's just walking around in the barn. They're just nice horses. And that's one reason too, like I'm a big believer in gelding. a lot of these horses because I want to turn these into nice horses that, my niece is gonna ride, or eventually it's gonna be a non-pro. To me, most of these high-end horses, open horses, are gonna get sold to non-pro horses, uh, and usually it's you know older women or younger kids, or and then it's gonna get sold down to a rookie horse. Eventually, it's gonna be a youth horse. So for me, training a horse, I try to put a lot of thought into my program as far as solid horses, but keep in mind, if they're not nice to be around, it's going to make hauling that horse a pain in the butt. So that's one thing, like for me, like I try to pick up on right away. I'm very big on making nice, good show horses that love their job. And when they're broke, I can turn them out. I don't got to ride the tar out of them every day. So that's very important. But that really goes to the mind. And I don't think you can make, like in today's event, is specific as it is. And there's so many good horses. If these horses don't want to do it, you're really wasting your time. You can still teach them, but they're never going to take a hold and say, like one thing, like you really think about the winner of every event, they're always saying, pick me, pick me. There's just something about those horses. And if they don't have that, and just because they don't have it early on doesn't mean they won't have it later. But if they don't want to be with you, usually it doesn't work.
Usually they don't have the heart for it, but
Exactly.
I mean, you bring up a huge point. The skill set that these horses are doing, if they didn't want to do it, there's no way you could force a horse to be able to do that kind of stuff and to be able to do it time and time and time again. So it's
no, and one thing like you've got to think about. So we've been trying to breed reining horses for really getting specifically breeding reining horses for probably the last 40 years. So really majority of these horses that are hitting the ground as babies, they'll be all stop and turn. I mean, that's just a given. How good, are they all +1 turners? No. But what's going to separate those ones is what's upstairs. And if that mind wants to do it, that's what can take a horse from a half maneuver off their talent and push it into a 1 because they want to and they crave it. So one of probably the very first horse, actually the very first horse I truly, really felt that on was a mare named Checksworthy, and she was the very first horse I ever made level 4 finals on. So going into the 3-year-old year, she was probably my number 8 horse. If I was going to rank them, she was probably my number 8th horse. That, I never thought she was going to turn into what she did. But her mind was incredible. Her mind was more than her talent, and she was talented. But going into the 3-year-old year, I thought she was just going to be a non-pro horse. But she was consistent. Every day she came out and said, "What do you want me to do?" "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." Literally was your best friend, heart of gold. And that mare showed that way. She was like, "If you want me to do this, I will do it, and I will do it more." And that was probably the first time I ever felt a horse's mind overweigh their talent. And I think that mare today has won $80,000. I won 40,000 on her, and then she went to a lower level trainer. But that mare, that was the first time I ever felt a horse just go, "I'm here for you, pick me." And she, turned into my number 1 horse. So it was just incredible the way that horse's mind was. She wanted you, she wanted to do whatever you wanted, and if you asked for 100%, she's going to give you more. That was pretty special.
I also liked your comment about having geldings and doing that, just because
Yeah.
I've been around so many people that have always been like, "Man, I want to have a stallion, I want to have a stud," and I'm just looking, I'm like, why?
Yeah. I think they got to be pretty special to be a stud. And most of the good studs, they act like geldings anyways. And yeah, keep in mind, I do think that, even testosterone carries down in generations. So if they're an orangutan, their baby's going to be orangutans too. And that's something that, if us as professionals, we're still trying to we're trying to make the reining horse better and better. So, and that's all mental stuff. So, if that's one thing we're going to influence, if they can't handle being a stud, well, they probably don't need to be a stud. And usually it catches up to them. There's so many different ways of a horse being studdy. That doesn't mean they're vocal. They could be pushy in their belly, which is where I feel it a lot. They always got that push back. Um, they can get that some studs get a little too timid. Um, and I always think sometimes you don't know until you haul them to a horse show. Well, if they don't haul good, like Vegas, that was a 19-hour haul. Well, if they're more worried about fighting the horse next to them, they're going to be wore out. The same thing when you stick them in some of these places, we go to, they're not solid dividers in between the stalls. And if you're stalled next to another stud and they're sitting there fighting, there's no way they're focused on doing their job. And there's no way you're going to get the most out of them. So as an investment standpoint, that is something that you do have full control of if you castrate them. But, as a trainer, it's something that you can't really control if they're sitting there fighting or playing around their stall all night. And now when you get them out, their mind's somewhere else, or they're so tired that they can't do the job, or they're focused. There's so many outcomes that people don't realize that go into play with testosterone. It's the same thing with mares. One thing that's important with a mare is trying to control their heat cycle. You don't want to go to the horse show and they come into heat, and now stuff happens that never happened before. So that is one thing that goes into the factor of a training program. But I do know one thing that we can control is if you geld a horse, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And it just makes it, to me, it makes those horses a lot happier too. I mean, I've never seen a gelding that, after the whole procedure, a couple months after you geld it, they weren't happier. I mean, so I don't know. I'm a big believer in making nice, solid show horses that are going to last a long time. And I do think there's a couple horses that in my barn that I think are exceptional as stallions, and there's a good chance they're going to have a breeding career, but that doesn't mean every stud that walks in the barn needs to be a stud.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I feel like more people need to understand, because so many people are just like, oh, this horse is so well bred, it's so talented, whatever, it needs to be a stud. And then it's like, it's really not what's best for its career or for, the trainer or for its life and things like that. But it sounds like obviously you've had a lot of different horses in your life. If you had to pick one that was the most influential, would you be able to pick one?
I don't think I could, just because, I mean, I've had the one horse I never mentioned was the very first horse that very first true reining horse that me and my grandpa bought together. His name was That Little Step Up, and he only won like $2,000. But that horse's mind was so good, and I messed him up so many times just trying to learn stuff. And he'd always come back, be like, okay, oh, you don't want to do it that way? Let's do it this way. Like he probably taught me the most. And I always tell people, you kind of got to have that test dummy to try stuff on. And it's not really, you need to learn what not to do. That's where you're going to truly learn the stuff. The stuff that works, you're just going to naturally pick. You're going to go, okay, I want to do that. But, every year on my horses, I go, I spent a lot of time doing that, and it really wasn't necessary. I think the stuff that works, you're just going to magically do it. And the stuff that you're going to learn what not to do, well, that's kind of what turns you into what you are. I think that's how you build your program. But, that's a horse that I never really mentioned. And, that horse, I tell you one thing I did learn, because I had to pay for, most of the show expenses. Well, I spun 5 times on that horse probably more than I spun 4 times. And a big thing that horse taught me was to count your spins. And it was on my dime too. So, that horse.
It's an expensive mistake.
There's a lot of horses that taught me a lot. Isn't She Perfect? That was a horse that I was reserve fraternity champion on. And that horse that was probably the breakout horse that said, you can do it. Like, you're that close to doing it, she was probably the one that got my name out there, big time. A Trendsetter probably is one of the most fun horses I've ever got to train, just because his physical ability is absolutely incredible, and his mind is incredible. And I still don't think I've gotten out of him what's in there yet. But I mean, gonna stop for what this horse has done for me. I was just talking to one of my close friends, Brandon Brandt, and I've shown that horse since he was 4, And I think of all the times I've shown him, there's only been like 2 or 3 times I did not get my face in the wind picture on that horse, which is pretty incredible, really. I mean, that horse was always good for me. And the times he didn't, like the one time at the Derby, he spun so hard, and when I shut him off, he sat on his hock for a split second, and I was going to be a 24.5 in the go around. Didn't make the final. I mean, he was incredible, but it's just like he just had a little bit of luck. It was never not being good. And then obviously winning the richest event we've ever had and pushing me over the $1 million mark, you know, that horse he's got a special story behind him too as well. But I mean, probably that horse is going to be one of the most influential or has done the most for me. You know, I mean, I don't think you can say Kole Price without thinking about Gonna Stop. So yeah, that was pretty special.
I used to be the managing editor for the Rainer, and I remember when you showed "Isn't She Perfect" at the futurity, and I mean, seeing that beautiful gray mare going to that. I mean, it's hard to not remember that picture.
Yes, yeah,
So.
That mare had absolute heart of gold too. Like that was probably the first special horse I had. Like she was like a robot mind. Like I don't know, just you could show her something once or twice, and if that's what she knew she was supposed to do, she was going to do it. But what was really cool about that horse is what she would do in the show pen. Like she was so dialed in and would give you more. Like I know going into the first go round, we had to change small slow, and I was a little worried about it. Like I've been working on it for like 2 months. And it wasn't really a problem. It was just a matter of making it perfect the way I wanted it. And it truly never is that perfect, but that was like, she changed the best in her life when I showed her. And she just did stuff in the show pen. I mean, that mare 1.5 a backup. She could run backwards faster. And I mean, most horses can go forward. And it was just that she just had that intensity to her. There's a picture back there. You can't see it right now. You can see it. Yep. That was when I marked 227. But that horse, it was like, that was the first time I marked that big of a score, and it was just like, okay, you have a shot at being with these people, all these people you looked up to, and that mare's like, I'm taking you there. So that was a pretty cool feeling.
I also remember because Gonna Stop was the level 1 and 2 futurity. I remember, and I had a chance to speak with Allie, and I mean, you could tell that horse was so special to her. So to be able to have a horse like Gonna Stop in your program now, that's huge. And I know Allie would be so proud of what you've done with him.
It was pretty cool when I came out of when I marked the 28.5 in the run. I came out of the pen, and I told Kelsey, I said there was a little extra push from somebody with us there. I mean, you could just feel it. Like, it was just different. It was pretty cool. And I know, like, Allie, she lived through that horse. She loved that horse. Not to get off topic there's a special story if you know it about, and clearly you do. Like, just, it makes everything that much neater. It's just cooler.
Yeah, I was super excited when I saw that score come up and then see you win, because you actually went into a runoff against Sean Flaherty. And so that, I mean, talk about the pressure of a lifetime. Is like, not only did you went like second to last, and then you scored this insane score, and then Flaherty comes in right after you, ties it. So then you're having to go in again at the biggest event ever against Sean Flaherty, who is somebody that, like, that was the first guy you saw do a reining run.
And he's a stone cold killer. Like, that is one guy.
He's
like
doing.
He's a finisher. Yeah. You know what? So this is a little side story, but this is just how my mind works. So when I had FM Shine and Tag checks, when I showed them made my very first level 4 final at the Congress, everybody ahead of me was at least $1 million rider, and everybody behind me was probably, for the next 6 or 7 places, was $1 million rider. And they asked me in my interview, was that intimidating? I said, absolutely not, because that is where I picture myself. Like, if you want to be with those guys, you better be able to compete against them and not worry about it. So my mentality has always been, I've never been a person to shy away or let that bother me. But honestly, it was like living out your childhood dream. It was like so surreal, and I was at peace with it. I was like, you know what? If he beats me, I'm just being a part of it. Like, the fact that I am running against Sean Flaherty, and not only that, but I'm a threat to Sean Flaherty. Like, that's like living, and I even told Sean that. I was like, that's like living out your dreams. And I don't even say childhood dreams, because it's still, I mean, you lay awake thinking about that. I mean, that was just so cool. Did I feel any pressure? No, I really didn't. And I'm not a person, I usually, as knock on wood, don't get too nervous. I just get more focused. Because you know what really goes into, you're riding a horse that I rode every day. I knew him like the back of my hand. There was a couple spots in the pattern I knew I just needed to get through. It was really cool because I had some people that I really look up to, like Andrea Fapani and Craig Smersel and Tom McCutcheon. They're pulling me aside and saying, hey, make sure you be slow with your hand and blah, 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 blah. And that was, it's really cool when your idols become your friends, and one thing that, before me and Sean even heard our scores, we gave each other a big hug, and he's like, I'm so proud of you for being here. And I was like, dude, you have no idea how much you influenced me. Probably without Sean Flaherty, I probably wouldn't have, seen Wimpy's Little Steps run, and probably have pushed myself to want to be who I am. So that was as a side note from the event, that was really cool to be a part of that.
Well, and being from the Midwest, I think,
Absolutely.
like Sean Flaherty, like that was who I grew up knowing as like the reiner, being from,
Yeah.
he's from Ohio. And so, yeah, to have seen this person, you see the first horse that you've ever seen in a reining event, and it be, Wimpy's Little Step, but, Flaherty, and now you're not only competing against him, but beating him. That says a lot about.
And I'll tell you one thing that was really cool about those people that were in that, and it's really cool about reining in general, but everybody that I competed against, the 15 riders, they have helped me. I've asked them questions, they've helped me. That's pretty cool to have everybody you're competing against at some point help you. So I think that's a testament to what reining is about, but that's really cool. And I think that's cool from a professional level, that, your colleagues are there rooting for you. And, that's pretty special.
Yeah, I have to say, like, in my very new journey into the reining and the cow horse world, it's just amazing how wonderful people are. And yeah. I remember at my first time I showed, I didn't know anybody, and people were whistling for me. And I was like, wow, that's really nice. And it's nice, like, people coming out and saying congratulations or good job, or, look out for this when you're in there. And yeah, I think that says a lot about the industry and the people that are in it.
Yeah, it was pretty special. I mean, it's like, it still hasn't really kicked in, and I don't know that it truly will, just because right now my mind is thinking on to the next horse show. So we flew home Sunday afternoon so I could be back riding Monday morning. I was on a horse at 5:30. So I don't really know that I'm getting the full effect of, enjoying it. And I don't know that I ever will, just because my mind is, you get a taste of it and now you just want more of it. And that requires hard work and putting your head down and going out in the arena and riding. So, I don't know that I'll truly get the full effect of it, but it was pretty special.
I love that, like you said, you're on to the next one. I think that's so important for someone to not get caught up in that and be like, oh, like, kind of get a big head over it. And it just seems like you're just totally like ready for the next one, want to keep going and just keep doing well. So I don't know if this is a question you can answer, but like, what's next for you? Do you have any horses coming up that like you're really excited for?
So my some goals that I'm really focused on. I'd like to win the 4-year-old Derby at the High Roller Reining Classic, which I won on Gonna Stop 2 years ago. There's a lot of added money in that, and obviously the futurity. That's my main focus. I got one. I got a group of horses that I'm really excited about. We leave actually probably Saturday for Tulsa, so we're gonna start showing the 3-year-olds. But there's a couple goals. Obviously I'd love to win the Congress, but the High Roller Reining Class, the 4-year-old deal, and then obviously the futurity.
3 huge events that are all coming up so soon. You're going to be busy these next couple months.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. And I know you've had a crazy busy schedule after your win this weekend. And of course, by the time this probably comes out, it'll be a couple of months or weeks from now, just because of the last Cowboy. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. And
my pleasure.
And I was so excited when I found out that you like just coincidentally had you in the lineup to do this podcast, and then you win the biggest event in history.
Yeah.
So that was awesome.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Ride Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Horse and Rider Magazine on social media and find us at horseandrider.com.
If you guys have any questions or comments, please be sure to hit us up at horseandrider@equinenetwork.com. We want to hear from you guys.
And if you like what you're listening to, be sure to leave us a review on iTunes.
Thanks again to Buy Mita for sponsoring this episode of The Ride.